If you had to grade your home on its health, what grade would your home get? Today, my guest is Nate Gossage from Livingstone Builders and Brian Johnson from Synergy 360. We are talking about a partnership that they have right now to build a super healthy home in Arcadia, Arizona. Today's podcast is all about clean air, clean water, healthy lighting, and making sure that your home can be the healthiest sanctuary to enhance your overall well-being. I sure hope you enjoy hearing from Nate and Brian right here. Well, super excited to have Brian and Nate right here to talk about this topic that I am so interested in. So this podcast is really kind of for Renee today. So I'm very excited to be chatting about this. So Nate, just to kick off at Livingstone Builders, you've really set an initiative that you want to focus on healthy homes. And so kind of share that, and then we can bring Brian into this.
Yeah, definitely. We have, my wife Abby and I, for the last, I'd say 5 to 7 years, have really gotten into the health and wellness space. And when you're listening to a lot of the experts and they're talking about, your eating habits, your supplements, your exercise, like all of these things, there's all these kind of like mainstream talking points and topics that people cover and they talk a lot about. And the one that hardly ever gets talked about, and maybe in small segments in different categories, but is the overall wellness environment of your home.
Right.
And we spend more time in our homes, whether it's sleeping, eating, exercising, doing whatever, than typically anywhere else that's in our environment. So the fact that the home environment was one that's been left out of the conversation so much, and that really became a focus of ours with a recent client whose home environment ultimately led to some major health issues that the husband was having, really put it even more so on our radar as a necessity, even more than just kind of a common interest. And so then we got connected with Brian and really started diving into more of the research on the home wellness side of things and learning really, not to like put fear, but how toxic a lot of the things in our home living environment are. So we're out eating well, we're investing in our food, we're investing in our exercise, we're investing in all these things, and then we're coming home to this home environment that's not supportive of that. So really opened our eyes to it, caused us to start doing some deep research, and we are super excited now about the things that we're learning with Brian and that we're starting to implement into these projects.
Yeah. Well, I love that we're talking about this. So they kind of call it sick home syndrome. So there are some people who have been sick from their homes, from either the mold or air quality, water quality, which we're going to talk about all that good stuff today. But really, I feel like this is, just like you said, with this whole health and wellness, I don't want to call it a craze because I think we've kind of made a shift moving forward that we're not going to come back from. Like, I feel like there's an interest in health and wellness that is not a trend or a craze. It's a new interest. You can't unsee, you can't unhear what we've all just seen and heard over the last couple of years, and the kinds of things that we can do to keep ourselves as healthy as possible. I think people are starting to look at health as the new wealth. And so we should be spending our money here. This is really where it's important. So I love that you've brought it into the home environment. Yeah. All right. Well, so Brian, we got to pull you in on this. So this is what you've been doing for a long time. Well, so how did you get into healthy homes?
Well, just kind of fell into it over the last 20 years. My background, I worked in the lumber industry, so I got familiar with molding lumber way back then. And when I started building in 2002, I was like, I'm going to build concrete homes. And that's where so I started right into ICF, which is insulated concrete forms. And really, it was kind of ahead of my time. I was just building for performance, right? Mm-hmm. Building these concrete homes that were fire resistant, right? Hurricane resistant and all these things.
All the good stuff.
And, but also too, I was really big into athletics. And so I spent years in the home building was kind of a short time span. I went more back into concrete work for a lot of years, but I was competing at a high level for mountain biking, Ironman, Xterra off-road triathlon, and so I was always pushing the envelope, right? Mm-hmm. But of course, I was also exposed to a lot of chemicals and mold in the field, and so the harder I was pushing it, believe it or not, here at 35 years old, late 30s, I was already getting brain fog. I was having like some serious things coming up, and I'm like,
Wow.
okay, am I training too hard? Am I eating too many carbohydrates?
Yeah.
And I'm doing all the supplementation and things like that. Well, I went into a deep dive into functional and integrative medicine, and working with some of the top environmental doctors in the country. And they really helped me wake up to understanding the environment. And actually working with she was a mold doctor, and even a house that I had built in California, she's like, well, why don't you have a mold inspector, that we work with a lot. So I had a mold inspector come through, and of course there was mold in the house and whatnot, and that wasn't like the
So
root
bad,
of the
right.
cause, but it was an awakening, right? It was an understanding to understand more of the microbiology around mold and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was about 10 years ago. So finally working with top mold specialists, top functional doctors, they were like, why don't you go back to building healthy environments? You understand, the whole biohacking, world,
Yeah.
right, of health and wellness, right? Because that's
Yeah.
ultimately what it is. Understanding the red light therapies, all the cold water plunges, and all these different types of things. Well, indoor air quality, mold, these are big hitters, VOCs in the air. And so basically, it's like you understand all these things, bring these together as a builder, right? So that's exactly what I did. And Nate, really, they've been doing this in the commercial level for a long time, right? The way that they focus on indoor air quality, more from a masses of public safety space, right?
Right.
Or, in hospitals or things like that, they have to have good quality lighting, which is, circadian lighting, right? And good quality lighting, and working with and of course, at that level, you're working with high-end designers, right? So there's a flicker, there's a tone of light, right? So in the commercial space, once I just brought everything from the commercial space and I brought it into the residential space, right? But I went deeper with it. I'm like, okay, we're going to put together, this company, and the focus on health and wellness and technology and modalities, right?
So what year did you launch Synergy 360?
Synergy 360 was launched. It was just launched 5 years ago. So it's kind of in this infamousy state still. But what I was going to share is, I wanted to understand more of the science, right? Show me the science.
Yeah.
Let's read the white
Yeah.
papers and understand everything. Well, that's where I found the Building Biology Institute, which was huge. I kind of feel like I was already building biology, but they go down the deep science rabbit holes behind, electricity and understanding EMF, right?
I love Building Biology
Yeah.
Institute.
Oh,
That, I cannot believe we have not
yeah.
covered this yet.
Yeah.
I almost feel like we have to take a break for a quick little glossary of terms, right? So EMFs, right? So I
Right.
know what they are, but let's share with everybody.
yeah.
EMFs, what are they and why do you not want
Yeah,
them?
so EMF is it's a general term for electromagnetic frequencies, okay? And I go kind of really geeky on this stuff, but I'm going to keep it real simple for
Yeah,
our audience
yeah.
here, okay? So we have electrical fields, which is the 60 hertz cycle. That's the electricity coming into the home. You're not going to get rid of that unless you want to, be living by candlelight and things, right?
Which some people do.
And I do work with clients that want to go to that level. But so we don't get rid of that, right? But we isolate it, right? We protect ourselves and we distance ourselves from those, right? So next to your outlet in your wall, you don't want your head sleeping right next to an outlet all night long, right? Because it doesn't, kind of going back to the health and wellness application from that perspective, just using this as an example, right? It doesn't allow our body to get to a place of homeostasis. The building biology uses a term, nature is a gold standard. Right, and that's how we want to build our homes. Right. We want to build our homes as if we're in nature, but yet we're being protected from the elements. Right. So in nature, we're not exposed to all these different types of EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, radio frequencies from microwaves,
Internet,
cellular internet. All these Wi-Fi systems.
Yeah.
And then of course there's this buzz around dirty electricity. Which is usually caused by inverters or motors and different technologies through the home that create what's referred to as dirty electricity, which is more of kind of a nuisance, but it is known to actually create a lot of symptoms.
I feel like I heard of a friend in in Orange County who did an insulated wiring system in the house to
Yeah.
eliminate or to reduce EMFs.
Yeah.
Is that a strategy?
That, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
They refer to it as MC, metal clad cabling. Yeah. Yeah. So it what it does is suppresses the electrical field. And it actually suppresses even dirty electricity as long as everything's wired properly. But yeah, it's definitely a gold standard on wiring for sure.
Already starting this, I know this could be a very long podcast. Let's just quickly recap, like, what are like the 5 things, the 5 worst things going on in your house? And not to scare people, but let's just be honest, right?
Yeah.
Like the home is one of the most toxic places. Also, so can be offices as well. But let's talk about like the top 5 things that we don't want, and then kind of work through them.
And to Nate's point, like there's no fear factor here, right?
Right. Yeah.
This is all education and awareness, right? So once we have that, we're working with a general contractor, an architect, designer, then now we can start educating one another around this.
And we can dial them back, one by one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can just take them one at a time and just have that. Even if it's like I have clients, that'll even go shut the circuit breaker off to their bedroom so they're not exposed to that EMF, right? That's, whatever. There's much more modern, ways of doing that, of course. But I think the top one is the mold. That's a big one, right? So building memory, was there existing water damage? Those are kind of like the big ones, which kind of that trickles into indoor air quality.
Yep.
Because that's a piece of it, right? Which also has an effect by VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and formaldehydes, and all the different chemicals and flame retardants and everything that they're putting into all the building materials. Now, the building industry is cleaning up. We know that there's a lot of non-VOC paints and, lacquers and, things like that being used, right? But it goes beyond that, like even, all the construction materials, right? So you can imagine all the different VOCs. So it's a matter of being aware. And in the industry, there's a lot of materials that are low VOC now that are readily available. Kind of getting into like the mechanical systems on how we filter and how we bring fresh air and how we ventilate that home, right? Because even if you do have a little bit of VOCs in there, as long as you have good ventilation that's filtered, of course, then we're able to purge that stale air out of that environment, right? Water.
Yep.
Water filtration's a very big one.
Huge one.
Yeah. So that's we were just talking about like in Malibu, we've done a lot of water testing over there, and we've picked up a lot of recent VOCs in the water systems, right? But that's everywhere too. You could be on a well and be exposed to heavy metals and things like that in the water that you need to filter. The city, we obviously know that cities putting in chlorine and all the other toxins into the water that we don't want. Yes. So filtration and different levels of filtration and understanding how to filter, and there's a mechanics behind it too, because you it's super convenient just to put a little RO under the sink, but yet you're still bathing in it. Right. So we really focus on whole house filtration, but engineering a way to where you still have high water pressure, because a lot of people have these big showers and all the rain heads and things like that. So we want to be able to filter that water at that capacity for those that want that high water consumption.
Yep.
Let's see. The EMF, of course, like we're talking about. But yeah, I would say that the mold,
and then lighting.
Then the lighting too. Yeah. So these are the top ones, because the circadian lighting, like we were talking about. I work with a manufacturer that produces like one of the healthiest lighting systems like in the world. The way that they clean up the power coming in. Here's what's really unique about this lighting systems. It's 100% low voltage. So just imagine an Ethernet cable controls all of the lights and the switches through the whole entire home.
Interesting.
It's actually really cool.
What company is this?
It's Colorbeam.
Oh, Colorbeam.
It's a company called Colorbeam. Yeah. So they're the only ones that produce this 100% low voltage. It's really cool, and that kind of lighting kind of ties into the radio frequency, which is the form of the EMF that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Because now a lot of these high-end manufacturers, and we won't say names, but they're going all wireless, right? Like, so all of their switches
Yes.
are wireless, and they rely on a wireless network. So, which ties into the whole smart home. This is a perfect segue into like a smart home. Like, smart homes are going a direction that we don't want, because now we're relying on these EMFs, right? The radio frequencies and all of this technology, right? So everything, all of the appliances, we have all these smart appliances, right? Everything's communicating on a wireless device. Again, nature's the gold standard. In nature, we're not going to be exposed to all of these different types of, it's non-ionizing radiation is what it is. Now, granted, they're lower levels depending on what the technology is, but you have your home that again has your wireless routers. Now you have your microwave, or hopefully you don't have a microwave.
No, we don't.
So
we call it at our house. So we call it at the house.
Yes, exactly.
There's one in our house we call the bread box. So we use it for storage.
Yeah. So the steam, of course, the steam ovens are really taking over for the microwaves, right?
Yeah.
But like even the stoves, the refrigerators, it's crazy. All your washers and dryers and everything. So.
Oh my gosh! Speaking of that, so when I'm at my house, you go through, and then one of the options on my wireless router is the Samsung washing machine, and I'm like, okay, unplug that. Right. It's just like how much wireless do you have in just one, very average house? I want to add something about circadian lighting too, just for our listeners, just so they can understand that in addition to the frequencies that are a part of that, you also want to have a lighting system in your house that mimics, just like you said, nature's the gold standard. So you want daylight to wake you up. You want what is natural nighttime light to be what helps trigger you to fall asleep. And so when your house follows that, even though you have lighting in your house, when it follows the rhythm of the sun, that's best for your body rhythms and sleeping and things like that. So a lot of people are liking these lights where the tones, can mimic nature.
Well, so in the health and wellness industry, right? So we're all about, like, it was so funny because when I was big into biohacking, understanding, the lighting, but it was like the blackout curtains, right? A little bit of blue light, minimizing the amount of blue light, in the evening time, right? Because the concept behind, blue light is it suppresses melatonin and increases serotonin, right? Which is, it's the flip-flop, right? So in the circadian,
keep you awake.
When the sun's coming up, you have this brighter kind of a spectrum, right? And then at high noon, we want to suppress melatonin and increase that serotonin, right? At high noon. And then, of course, at evening, then we want to, the opposite, right? Well, so we have our own biology of the hormone, right, and the disruption, right? And then, of course, we have the technology or the natural light. And then, of course, how do you use the technology to incorporate that within the home? And so back to kind of like the whole thing around like color beam, for example. And there's other manufacturers doing this from a quality lighting perspective, but it's how we measure the light spectrum in nanometers. Which is like an infrared, or your red light therapy. They always graded on how they measure it in nanometers, and it kind of gets geeky. But like a blue spectrum is like a lower nanometer wavelength, and infrared is like 800, and then it keeps going on to invisible, right? So the sun produces these certain spectrums of nanometer wavelengths, right? Well, from a circadian lighting standpoint, they understand that. So when they create the LED light, it's actually putting out these nanometer spectrums, okay, to simulate that of natural sunlight, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a term that we refer to as CRI, right? It's the color rendering index. And so like your designers that are designing like a gallery or something like that, they want the highest CRI rating, because so the higher the CRI rating, that's mimicking natural light.
And there's less color in that light, so that the artwork appears more
Correct.
true. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Little bits and pieces I've been learning along the way here.
Right. And that's what's really cool. Like, for example, like the color beam. So there's a circadian mode, and so it actually tracks. And they're not the only one that does this, right? But there's basically sensors, or not only sensors, but also by geographic coordinates. It will track where the sun is in your region. It will adjust the light where it's supposed to be at that time of day inside of the house.
Wow, that's
just
amazing.
by the push of a button.
Okay, so Nate, I've got a question. So we're talking about like all these things that can happen in your house. When clients come to you to build their dream home, their luxury custom home, like what are they concerned about or interested in as it relates to everything that Brian's talking about?
Yeah, and I mean, surprisingly, like you said, this is relatively new in that people are thinking through this when they're building these homes. And we'll sit in on conversations for multi-million-dollar projects where the entire conversation is around my cabinetry, my faucets, my mirrors, my lighting fixtures, and zero conversation about the things that we're talking about today. And it's more so been a very easy conversation where as soon as we mention it, as soon as we start giving them a little bit of insight on it, they want to hear more. They're all about it. It's one of those things like people don't even think about it until you bring it to their attention. It's the same thing, like generally if you're healthy, you're not thinking about going to the doctor until someone's like, hey, you should take a look at this. And then, they get very involved. But it's definitely a conversation that we're having on all of our projects now. And it's kind of more of a degree to what their level of interest is in it. But from the conversations we've had, everybody's wanted to know more about lighting. Everybody's wanted to know more about air quality, and everyone's wanted to know more about water quality. Like those are the three hands down that even people that aren't super into health and wellness are just like, hey, I know the water coming into my house is bad and it should be better. I know the air coming into my house is bad. It should be better. And then with not too many people know about lighting, but in a 5-minute explanation of why lighting is so important, people are like, okay, let's, go with that. And what I'll say too, because we're obviously talking very high level, new home construction, top of the line systems, which inevitably come with a cost and a process and everything that's involved. And what I'll say to make it more accessible to everyone, I mean, because there's probably people that are listening to this that are like, I'm not planning on building a new home anytime in the near future. And I would say, even if you explore lighting at the bare minimum, most people nowadays, even if you live in an apartment or you live in a house that was built in the last 15, 20 years, most all lighting now are these LED bulbs, right? They're these LED lenses. They're not bulbs anymore, that are screw in. And a lot of times you'll go into people's houses where these lights, these LED trims are set at 3, 4, 5,000 Kelvin. So at night you've got this beaming bright white light that is affecting your circadian rhythm. It's affecting your sleep. So a very simple hack to this that pretty much anyone can do. You can go to Home Depot now, and for like $6 a can, they have, maybe more now because inflation, $10, but they have these adjustable bulbs that have a little slide on it, and you can set all those to 2,700, 3,000 Kelvin, put them in, hook them to a dimmer switch, and now you have a significantly better lighting system at night for your sleep and your circadian rhythm. You're not spending 6 figures on a lighting system, but you're doing something to improve, because that is one thing, and we can talk about some small practical hacks later, but now that we're on the topic of lighting, that is one thing that, like, if you're living in a house with 5,000 Kelvin lighting and you put in 2,700K on a dimmer, you're going to notice a drastic difference at night when you're going to bed and you're walking around in that environment versus this bright white light. So yes, I mean, that's a conversation that, like, for us, after learning about it, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You're like, okay, you guys, if we're going to spend millions of dollars on this house, we need to talk about some things that are going to improve your life. And especially for our athlete clients or people whose lives and their livelihood is centered around their health and wellness. I mean, nowadays, it really doesn't matter what you do. Kind of your ability to produce in what you do for a living centers around your health. So if we can help 100%. Improve that, then we want to implement as much as the client's willing to let us do into a client home, and as much as we are capable of doing into a spec home.
Yep, absolutely. Since we're on it, let's talk about another little simple hack. How about a water hack?
I would say, well, the top 3 that I know of, and then I'll let Brian elaborate, but the easiest ones that I know of that would make the biggest impact with minimal cost, and this is more so if you are planning a new home, but if you're planning a new home, one of the things that I've come to learn is one of the the largest sources of EMF, which we were talking about, is the main SES panel. So your main service panel for your house emits a high volume of EMFs versus like an electrical outlet or something like that. And something that could be potentially hazardous is if you're putting that main SES panel up against, like, say, a bedroom wall that's sharing a headboard on one side.
And the SES, is this a thing that's outside behind the little metal door?
The big panel. The big electrical panel with with the meter and all of your breakers. So Yeah, exactly. So a very easy plan with that, without spending any money, is to just have the architect or the builder locate that panel as far away from living areas as possible, as far away from bedrooms, and that won't cost you any extra money if you're building a new house. Just put it on the side of a garage or something like that to help. Another hack, if you, whether you're building a new home or you live in a home now, if you're building a new home, what we're doing now to minimize the Wi-Fi exposure, especially at night, is we are hardwiring with Ethernet cables, like your TVs, anything that's fixed that's not going to move, run an Ethernet cable to it, hardwire it to your internet service, and then for your Wi-Fi, we put it on a kill switch. So at night, you flip the switch on the wall, shuts off all the Wi-Fi. If you live in an existing home, hook your router to a timer that plugs in, that shuts off at 10 o'clock at night when you're asleep anyway, and clicks back on at 6 a.m. or whenever you need it. And that's a $8 timer from Home Depot that shuts your Wi-Fi off at night.
So we have that. Only my timer is named Spencer, and the second Spencer goes to bed, I know, because the button is by he's got the little remote control, and all of a sudden I'll be watching something. I'm like. Okay.
Exactly, right. No more Wi-Fi.
There it goes. So we've done a bunch of these hacks at the house. But like the internet's a huge thing.
It is.
That's a huge thing. And when you're in a high-rise building, surrounded by like if you're an apartment building or a high-rise community, then you've got other people's internet.
It'll affect your sleep quality. And the last thing I know of, and then I'll let Brian elaborate on water, is now a lot of the companies, Kohler specifically, has come out with the shower heads that have the filters built into the shower head. So not a perfect system to the level of like a UV, but at least it's filtering the shower that the water that you're bathing in, which will make a difference. And that's literally just unscrewing your current shower head and screwing theirs on, and then you've got filtered
And by the way,
shower
there's
water.
some crazy people. I'm not naming names. It's not like that I know them or anything, but some of those people travel with those too.
Yeah.
'Cause it screws right on in a hotel room too.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that that's anything that I usually do.
It's a good idea.
Just saying that you could do it if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely.
5-pound shower head that you're putting.
Well, that suitcase is really
I
heavy.
mean, hey, it's worthwhile.
I don't know. Once you get used to that, you just sort of believe like I just don't want all that icky water.
Yeah.
But so back to home building. So what's really cool is that this conversation's going on, and that even like 10 years ago, nobody was really talking about this unless somebody had like a really significant health thing that was driving them. I don't feel well, and because you were in this very early. When did people start talking about all this?
Yeah, it was interesting when I started Synergy 360. I've always been kind of a trailblazer and always pushing the envelope, right? And so. I remember a lot of friends, because what's Brian up to now, right? And I was like, I'm going to go into building healthy homes. And they're looking at me like, what's a health? Like all of the lighting, the water, building healthy, non-toxic. And a lot of people were like, if anyone's going to do it, it'll be you, but good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
Because you're building for like the 0.1%, the population, right? And it was interesting when I did start, and started kind of hitting Instagram and really doing a big push on Instagram and hashtagging this and whatever, and there was no one talking about like hashtag healthy home or holistic home or, like there wasn't there. 5 years later today, and maybe it's just because it's my world of everyone that I follow, but there's a massive amount of people that are, now become consultants or, even getting into the healthy home building industry, right?
Yeah.
I see it all the time.
What's really cool is there's a younger generation that's really interested in this right now. And even though there's a lot of misinformation on TikTok, there's some good information on TikTok too.
Yeah.
And there's kind of this younger generation. There's a lot of 20-somethings that are starting to say, gosh, if I pay attention to this when I'm in my 20s, like how awesome would it be when we get to, the ages of our parents, as opposed to our parents who, I mean, heaven forbid how we grew up, right? Smoking parents and things like that.
Yeah, no
really, no seatbelts, like not a healthy home. And so I feel like there's a younger generation.
Well, we had mom to manage the windows. Remember?
Yeah, exactly.
Grandma and mom, they would always open the windows at certain times of the day, to let all the fresh air in.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah. Okay, so that brings up, so I'm confused about this. So some people talk about like a really tight house that you can have, that the house, is it good to have the house open? Some people were doing such a good job with construction that the houses are so tight now that can be working against us. So what's the optimal with that?
So, I mean, Nate and I will both give our opinions on this one for sure, so from like understanding building, there's a total science to this. Okay, so building envelope is one of my core philosophies on when we're doing building design, right? So kind of historically, yes, they were building the building envelopes so tight, but yet they were using a lot of chemicals, and then there was lack of ventilation. And then, of course, when you have lack of ventilation and imbalance in temperature and condensation, you know what that's going to lead to. It's going to lead to mold growing behind, walls and the drywall and, all kinds of places, right? Because of both. There's the house can't breathe, right? And there's just no ventilation to it. And, of course, they're using all these chemicals on top of that, right? The way that I view it is I still build concrete homes. It's kind of my number one choice, right? We've come a long ways in how we built. We actually use like a non-toxic ICF now. It's a totally recycled materials and everything like that. Even though it's a 12-inch thick wall, right? It still has a permeability to it, right? It's breathable. So we're trying to find the balance of using materials to protect us from the elements, to keep the water out, but yet to climatize and balance that air between the outside and the inside and what's going on in that wall cavity, right? So it's a permeability. So we have high-tech building materials, weather-resistant barriers, rain screens, and all these types of things that are keeping the water out. But if the water was to get in, we still want some permeability in there so the water has a way to breathe through that wall. Okay. So now we can design still, conventional wood construction that way. But I find, building, I even build rammed earth homes.
Yeah. Oh, I love
2
that.
foot thick walls, right?
Yeah.
There's some rammed earth homes up here in this region.
It's a cool material.
It's really, really cool, but it's very complex to build with, okay?
Right.
And make no mistake about it. And now, building ICF, there's some complexities to it, but it's basically building with a block, a cement block on steroids, and there's journeyman block layers all over the country. So my mission is to work with general contractors and train them how to build, kind of going back to conventional, block, but using, it's FazWall, by the way, is the name of this. It's a really cool block system. And it has that breathability. Right? And there's no wall cavity into it. So yet we're creating a very high insulated R-value home, right? But it still has a permeability, and we're eliminating, if moisture is to get in, moisture has a way to get out, right?
Right.
And we're minimizing the chances of mold growing in that wall.
Gosh, it makes me think mold is probably a much bigger problem than we all think. So what's your take on this, Nate?
Brian said it perfectly. I mean, so much of the homes, especially in the desert, is designed 6 months out of the year out here, we're designing that thing to be a Yeti cooler that never escapes any air or lets heat in. So with that comes whatever gets trapped in there, and then you've got mold issues and things like that. So I think right now there's somewhat of a turning point in how to design a home to also breathe, because for the last however many years with R-value, with insulation, with shear walls, you name it, everything was centered around how to keep the air that's in and how to keep the air that's out.
Right. Yeah.
And then there was no conversation of how to marry the two and let them kind of work in tandem. One thing that we do standard now on all of our systems, because the name of the game is still to keep air out in the summer. You don't want a lot of that heat transfer and stuff coming in. Yeah, exactly. Just for, the sake of keeping your home comfortable and cool. And now with, modern style is very popular in the desert now. All of the doors and windows are thermally broken aluminum, so that you're keeping, the exterior portion of that aluminum is very hot and the interior portion of that aluminum is hopefully cold or room temperature.
Yeah.
With that, in trapping that air inside, another big thing, I'm making sure I'm using the right term, carbon dioxide inside the home. Is that right? What we're emitting, and that is kind of accumulate. Yeah, if you're not getting that ventilated through. So that is one thing Abby and I went way down the rabbit hole on that, and basically learned that your cognitive function, the parts per million of carbon dioxide, as it increases, it reduces your cognitive function. So once you get up past, I think it's 1,200 parts per million, it starts to reduce, and then it gets up to 18. We have a little meter in our office that shows, and it's time to open the doors and windows. But the ventilation, people don't realize, when you're in Arizona and you're constantly keeping your doors and windows closed for months, and if you don't have air that's being circulated, that air in your home becomes really nasty to live in for months at a time. So even without mold, even without those things, just having that lack of fresh air, all of that stuff kind of, So what we've started to do now, which is very simple, and it is common on a lot of HVAC systems, so this is nothing like groundbreaking, but some of them don't have it, which is within your HVAC systems, you will have a fresh air intake. So when it's sucking the air, when it's drawing the air in, it's drawing the outside air in and mixing it with your inside air.
Right.
So when that air is circulating through your vents and then cooling your home, it's at least drawing in some of the outside air with it so that you are getting that. So best thing to do is at night when it does drop in temperature, open your doors and windows for a minute, like let your house vent, let some fresh air get in there, let it out. Yes, your temperature is going to go up 5, 6, 7 degrees, but you can crank it back down after you close it up. But let your house vent on a regular basis. Let the fresh air in, let it kind of breathe and do its thing. Because to Brian's point, if you trap everything in there, that's when you start to create those issues.
So it's so interesting that we'd be talking about this. So I open up my bedroom door every morning and leave it open for like about an hour, just because I just like having that door open, and for maybe
it's like something intuitive.
Something intuitive says you better do this. Anyhow, it's not so hot that it's really a problem. But there was over the weekend, so I was reading this article about the mindset of dealing with heat, right? And it's right around the end of July that in Arizona we're all like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Like you just sort of hit a little bit of a wall. And so I was reading this and I'm like, yes, I'm one of those people. I'm hitting a heat wall. Like I've had too much of it. And it was the same thing they were just talking about, just open up your house and get some fresh air, because like that day I'm like, I think I'm tired. I think I'm foggy. Like everything that you could have from heat was happening. And I'm like, I just got to open up the house. And it just felt so good. So you can even have a physical response to that, I think, because my house has been like closed up for a week. So, but this office, it's making me think about that too. We've got our air purifier over there. That's our attempt to try to do the best we can here, but we could do better. So we need the monitor as well. Well, so what should a homeowner do? So for all the people who are building homes, and certainly they're renovating homes like crazy right now. And by the way, before I ask this question, I want to ask this question. Speaking of renovation, so when you renovate a house, and say you buy somebody else's house and you're renovating a house, that house could have a lot of this yucky stuff that we're talking about. So before you start construction, is it a good idea to can you do testing on the whole thing and figure out what you're dealing with? Is that a good first step on a renovation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. To get a baseline. For sure where you're at. Whether it's like mold testing or testing for VOCs, testing the water. Those are definitely. I do a lot of home inspections, and these home inspections. This isn't like a real estate transaction kind of a home inspection, right? This is a home inspection on steroids, because we're looking at everything on what it's going to take to create a healthy environment, right? And so we get the baseline. We put together the reports, the testing. We get all the data back, and then of course, then we give the client the good, better, or best kind of an option of all the different categories that we're talking about here today. On what you can do, and where to start.
I feel like that's a great first step. So we've got a big renovation project that we've been talking about here at Iconic, and so we know right now, just this current market, there's just a lot of renovation going on, because it's hard for people to move and things like that. And it's just, in some cases, it's not the right time for people. So they're renovating a home rather than moving to a new home. So I think that's a good, important first step. So when it comes to building a new home, like when should this conversation start with your builder?
This conversation should start hopefully this video here and this time that we're all talking inspires, because it'll usually start with the architect, or in the builder and the architect, if that's the relationship. But it's definitely in the design, because when I'm for example, Nate and I are working together, it's ideal, because we're going through all the architecturals, and now we're embedding all of the technologies. Right, the HVAC systems, the air quality systems, the lighting systems, the electrical systems, all these things, right? And now, and what we do, and then too, also, is we're putting specifications on all the materials. The drywall, the insulation, all the different types of materials, the paints, the countertops, the cabinetry, the millworks, all the things, right? So now we're creating in the specification document, before we even break ground, we have a clear, defined role and blueprint of how to build a healthy home right out of the gate. So it's definitely, you know, to have that awareness with the intention of working with in design.
Right.
That's ideal. And when I started, when I started Synergy 360, I was like, I didn't want to even mess with like remodeling or renovations, you know, because I was like so far with it. I was like, nope, it's got to be this way, you know. In order to create this environment, we got to go through all these steps, you know. And as I was going along, everyone's like, yeah, but what about my house? You know, what can I do? You know, and I'm like, okay, I've got to reformulate my business model here, and you know, and so everything that we're talking about from like new construction, you know, the same rules apply for renovation too. You know, sometimes it's cheaper to build new than it is to renovate in some cases, right? But, you know, or, you know, there's that kind of the good, better, or best model, right? So what I do is I've vetted all these different like materials and systems and things like that. So we give the clients, you know, some ideas right out of the gate. So when they're doing the design, they can actually help put a budget together. You know, hey, maybe they might want to focus more on lighting and, you know, less on this, or, you know, put more on that or whatever, right?
Yep.
But of course the building envelope should be number one for sure. Yeah.
Well, and that's your original house too. So, you know, obviously you can make more modifications over time too.
And I was going to say too, to your question, Renee, on when to involve someone like Brian, especially if you're building a new home, and like what I've learned more about in this process with Brian and I working on this first one of many together, but it will be someone like Brian. If you're working with a consultant or you're working with Brian specifically, like, you would be wise to have him or someone like him involved in all of the conversations you have with your architect, with your designer. I mean, we typically have our whole team that gathers throughout the design process of a home with architect, interior designer, myself, and landscape architect, anyone like that. And so Brian or a consultant would be another piece of that puzzle to when we're in those meetings having those conversations. He can give insight as to the better options and things like that from his standpoint.
Yeah.
So if someone's really taking it seriously and they're going ground up with a home that they want to have be a healthy home, having Brian or someone like him involved in those conversations from the very beginning and throughout is going to lead to the best product. And on the renovation side, I think definitely if you're doing your own renovation, obviously you have a lot more control over the things that you're taking a look at versus if you're buying a house that someone else had renovated prior. But I mean, I would be interested in what you think, but I think the biggest thing to go and check for in any of those houses is, of course, mold. We've talked about that many times, and I feel like that is the easiest one to find and the one that has the most consequences if not taken care of. So if you're buying a renovated house, if you're going to renovate a house, there's multiple companies in town. Google mold detection, mold testing. Have someone come through, test the home for mold, and that will save you a tremendous amount of health issues, headaches, all the above, if there is mold present in the home that you can remedy. Because to your point, Renee, on these renovations, I mean, homes in the valley that have been here 20, 30, 40, 50 years, chances are pretty good that it's probably hiding somewhere in there to some degree.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, really, if you think about Paradise Valley's got all these older homes, and there's so much renovation there. Where does it meet? So we were talking about healthy home. Where does healthy home also meet healthy person? So red light saunas, salt rooms, cold plunge. Does that figure into some of the things that you're doing? Is that what you're interested in, or is that like the next step that people might take?
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I mean, because that's the background of that is what led me to this, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say the awareness, really, people are waking up from just the health and wellness aspect, right? And so that's kind of the vehicle that drives everybody into the space, right? So we can have the health and wellness space, but now we need the health and wellness home, right?
Right.
So like I would say every one of my clients, and I have a lot of clients, all understand red light therapy, cold plunges, air quality, and all these types of things, and it's a huge crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I've seen this explode over the last 5 years, and the health and wellness sector is definitely starting to close in on the healthy home aspects, because they definitely go hand in hand. You know, we spend, maybe 90% of our lives indoors somewhere, whether it's our own home or car or an office, right?
Yep.
So it just feels so good for me to be part of this revolution of seeing everybody understand the importance of healthy home. My philosophy is every home should be a wellness center. Imagine your home as a wellness retreat, right? That's how we want to create it,
Yeah.
And we can start from the basics in the beginning, but, just optimize ourselves and build our way up to, a much healthier environment for sure.
Wow,
Yeah.
I love that. That is the perfect place to wrap this up. Everybody's home should be a wellness retreat.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
like it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm in.
Yes.
Well, thanks, guys, for being here. Super interesting. And your contact information is going to be in the show notes. So anybody who's got more questions, they're gonna know how to find both of you.
Well, perfect. Renee, thank you. And Nate, thanks for inviting me to the show.
Yeah.
And, the work and relationship is super exciting. Just one thing I wanted to close out. It's such an opportunity to work with contractors like Nate that are open-minded, that have connections to the clients. And that my goal is to work with, Nates across the country, because really it starts with you, right? And it starts with the client. And so my goal as a builder is actually forming more as a consultant, but I'm more of a building consultant, right? Because I'm a builder too as well. And so the opportunity to work with builders, that's the biggest thing right now. And so anybody listening to this, if you're a builder, you're in the trades, you're an architect, jump on board.
You know who you are.
Yep. So thank you, Renee. Yes.
Awesome. This was so interesting. I loved it. Thanks so much. Well, that's the pod. Thanks for joining me this week. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and hit the bell so that you never miss an episode. And for more about Iconic Life, please go to iconiclife.com. Until next time, I'm Renee D. We'll see you soon.